All right, well, we've got our next guest here, and let me just put that link back into the chat pod. But Angela, you are a member of both our education team here, and you help out folks daily with Coffee Break, and you also help people with some of their technical problems. So you are doubly useful. You teach people how to get things more done with Luminar, and you also help them get more things accomplished or if they get stuck. So I'm going to stop screen sharing so you can start screen sharing. But what are you going to show us today?
All right, so today I'm going to talk about using borders and textures. I just watched a little bit of Meredith's segment, and she's a master. She's really good at this. So the techniques I'm going to show you are a little bit simpler, but ways that you can jazz up a few images with adding a texture or even turning an image into kind of a painterly type of image. So go ahead and share my screen, and we'll do that. So to start here, Rich, I don't know if you can grab it real quick, but this insiders post where you have these overlays that you shared, that's what I'm
Yeah,
going to be using today. So if you could pop those into the chat, that'd be super cool.
I will. I'm going to give
Um,
people a direct link because if they're not a member of AI Insiders, they might not be able to access that. But anybody
right.
who owns Luminar AI receives an invite to AI Insiders, and that's our online community where we post resources and articles and tips and techniques and have daily lessons. Not 14-hour daily lessons, but twice a day, you and Vanelli hold half-hour get-togethers where people can ask questions and interact. But there's that texture kit for the paper, so you
Yep.
can download these that she's going to be showing.
Excellent. So I've got a few images here that I want to go through today. The first one is actually one that we did on Coffee Break last week. And I really love the fact that if you look at this image, it looks kind of like you're looking through a frosted window pane out on this canal in Amsterdam. Let me show you the original here. There's the original. So you can see it was already a snowy image. I popped it a little bit with a template and then applied this frame. And now that we have PNG support, which means it supports those transparencies, it automatically had this cutout and made it look like we're looking through a frosted window. So let me go ahead and walk you through the steps here. I'm going to go to adjustments, revert this to original, and then we'll start with a template and click back here to the for this photo. And let's take a look at what we've got. Scenery is one of my favorite categories, and I love this one called Fast Fix. It just adds a really nice pop of detail and contrast to just about any image. And I found it to be almost universally useful. So from there, I'm going to go to edit and straight into local masking so we can add this border. I'll click on add and texture and go to load texture. And I've already downloaded those textures that were mentioned before. I'm going to go to my folder. Now I keep a specific location on one of my external drives for all of my assets. I have borders, LUTs, objects, skies, textures, all of those things I try to keep in one location so they're easy to find when I need to get to them. For
Yeah,
this,
and
I'm
you
going to
don't
go
have
here.
to add these to your Luminar library, nor do you put them in a special folder. Just pick a place that's organized on your hard drive where you can find them easily.
Exactly. So I'm going to go to this paper texture kit and to the paper PNG. The PNGs are the ones that have the transparency. So let's take a look at what we have here. Let me change the view here so we can, let's see here, columns. Oh, there it is, way over there. And let's make this bigger so we can see what we're looking at. All right, there we go. And so let's take a look at some of these options that we have. That black one's really nice. The edge is white. That's the one I want to go for. So I'm going to go ahead and click open. And that's going to place that over my image. Now it is a huge file. So right now we can't see those edges. So I'm going to click on place texture. There it goes. It loads, but you can see it's not lined properly. Click on place texture. And then I'm going to make this much smaller. And now I can see the bounding box of that texture. And I can more easily place that right where it needs to go. Now I did that. I'm going to hit return on my keyboard to commit that and move this back to fit to screen. And now my texture is placed. It's automatically an opacity of 50%. To go ahead and get that frosted window pane look, I'm going to pull that up to, let's say about 90%. So we get a little bit of the detail coming through the edges, but not a lot. And there you have it. That's a really, really quick and easy way to do that. Now this texture does bring in some, I don't know if I'd call it grain, but kind of, texture here in the sky. If you don't like that, you can always click on the erase tool. And I'm going to use the bracket key on my keyboard to make this much bigger. I'm also going to bring the opacity down and then just erase some of that texture where you
Yep,
don't want
and
it.
that was by design with this one. Angela, could you press the / key too, so the mask just stays on so people can
Yep,
see it? Yep.
yep. There we
So
go.
in this one, when we made this from a real piece of ripped canvas, and it had a texture feeling. So we wanted to leave some of that in, but we do have frames in that texture kit that don't have that, that are clean. And we'll give you a couple extras of these. Actually, I'll upload some now, and I'll give you some bonuses that aren't in this texture kit at the end of Angela's presentation. But keep going, Angela. This looks great.
So I mean, I do like the texture that's there, and I think it does add something to the rest of the image, but that sky right there, it just was looking a little too crunchy for my taste. So that's why I just grab that eraser and take that out of there. And then I can call that done. And there's the before and the after. So with the help of a template and then adding that frame, I've made a really cool frosted window pane look. So that was example number one, really quick and easy. Example number two, I'm going to go to this image here of my cat. This is Glenn Levitt. And recently my photography club has a challenge going, and it's to do an image. The theme is regal. And so he's always very proper looking. So I grabbed several images of him, and I thought it would make it look really cool to make it painterly. So he's up on top of his perch. Here's the original. So I got him in really good light. It was, light coming in through a big sliding door. And so I've got great catch lights in his eyes, but it's a bit distracting behind him. So I used some textures and a few tools in Luminar AI to get here.
Yeah,
So
I
I'll
like it
walk you through
because
that.
your eye is no longer drawn to that bright platform that he's on. Instead, it goes right into the cat.
Exactly. All right, so let's walk through this one. This one's a little bit more involved. So I'm going to click revert to original. And you can see that it's actually a much bigger image than I was showing in the after image. So for this one, I'm going to go straight to the edit tab into my
Tips when
tools.
shooting children and animals: shoot a little bit looser because they move.
Yes, definitely. All right, so I'm going to go to composition AI, and I'm going to change this. I don't remember what aspect ratio I used. I'm going to definitely straighten this out so that platform is straight. And then let's come in here from the left and bring this up, I think right about there. And I'm actually going to leave that aspect ratio right about where it is. And I'll hit return on my keyboard to go ahead and commit that crop. Now, in doing this, I've noticed that I have a little bit of open space here where the platform ended. I want to extend that over. So I'm going to go down to the clone tool, let that load up there. And I'm going to sample from this area over here, and then bring that in and just extend my platform over to the side. And it doesn't have to be perfect. The reason being is we're going to darken that up, and it's really just kind of anchoring the subject to the photo and giving us that little bit of continuation, but we're going to mask out so much of it with the texture that the perfection is not necessary. Now, I want to darken up that platform at the bottom. I'll go to my local masking, and I'm going to do a gradient mask. So we'll go to add, basic, and I'm going to choose gradient here. And
So, Angela, I got one piece of good news. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the team was so excited that we just hit over 500 people watching live. That was the cue.
Awesome.
We have a special treat. So the code Deep Dive will let you save $10 off anything over at Skylum. So you can use this to get things like textures or skies or extra things. So you can check out the marketplace, or if you haven't used Luminar AI yet, that'll let you save $10. So sorry to interrupt. We hit our milestone and we got over 500 people. So I was able to unlock that code. So there you go.
Excellent.
It's like an in-game. We unlocked it in game. We didn't win the game yet, but we hit the next level right now.
Ooh, I want to know what the next level is after that. All right, so I've got my gradient drawn. Now I can grab the exposure slider and pull that down to darken up that platform. And so I'm going to pull that down pretty dramatically, and you'll notice that there is a little bit of overlap here on his paws. To fix that, I'll switch this back to the paint mask and go to the erase. And I'm going to make my brush a bit bigger using the bracket key on my keyboard. And I'm going to pull the opacity down a little bit on that brush, and then brush this in to get rid of that mask that's hitting his fur. And just ever so softly bring that back in. So now that looks a little bit more natural. Maybe clean that up a little bit on that side. Perfect. So now he's standing out more. That platform is kind of falling away, but it still anchors him and gives him a place to sit. So now we can start getting creative with some of the other tools in Luminar AI and also fixing a couple of other small issues. He's got a little eye booger right there and a little speck in his fur, and I want to get rid of those. This is a portrait and I want him to look his best. So I'm going to go back up here to the top to the erase tool and let that load up. And I'm going to get in there and just erase that little mark there next to his eye and get that little speck out of his fur. So click erase there and get rid of those. And distractions be gone. There we go. And now to go ahead and give this a little bit of a painterly look, my favorite tool for this in Luminar is the mystical tool. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up and grab that amount slider, move that to the right quite a bit. And you'll see that that's adding a nice bit of softness and glow. And it does also affect the eyes. And I want to keep his eyes nice and crisp. So I'm going to grab my mask tool on the tool and click on erase, make my brush smaller, and just mask out the effect on his eyes. So that way we're not losing detail in that area. All right, there we go. And then we can further modify the mystical here. Let's see. I don't think I really want to change the warmth of the saturation. We can make this a little bit softer or a little bit less soft, depending on what you're looking for. I think right about middle was good. And then we can adjust the shadows. And usually with this tool, I typically move it to the right, but in this image, I want to darken up those shadows. Again, we're trying to make our subject pop out of the image and make that background fall away. So we've gone a long ways here. Let's take a look at where we started. There's our before and our after. We're already getting much closer to that painted look. From here, I'm going to go ahead and start adding on a couple of textures. Let's go to our local masking and add texture. And I'm going to go to load texture. And there were a couple of different ones I used in this image. I'm going to go up a level here to the paper texture kit, which is the one that you just got the link to download, and go back into my texture here, paper texture kit, there it is. And I'm going to go into the JPEGs. Now these ones do not have the transparency, which is totally fine. You can still do a lot with it. Let me go ahead and make this column here smaller so we can see what we're looking at and figure out which ones we want to add onto this image. So I'm just going through and looking to see what's going to add depth and dimension to this image. You know, I really like that canvas one there. I think that's going to add some really cool texture. So let's go ahead and hit return on the keyboard there to commit that and let that load up. Now I'm going to go to, actually, before I do that, let's click on place texture and then go to 25% so we can see the bounding box for that texture, and then resize it to where it fits our image. Let me bring that down. There we go. And again, this one doesn't have to line up perfectly. You can have it however you want it. And if you want to even angle those lines of that texture, you can turn it and make it a little bit off kilter if you like. It's completely up to you. I think right about there looks good. I might even bring this edge out a little further. All right, so I'll hit return on my keyboard to go ahead and commit that placement and jump back to fit to screen. And now we've got this at 50% opacity. If I pull it all the way up, it's going to obscure our photo. I want to do that temporarily here so we can take a look at our blend modes and see if any of these work well.
And Angela, while you're making that tweak, I just wanted to remind people, I put the download links to the analog retro LUTs and the paper kit. I also just added a new bonus called Torn Edges that even Angela doesn't have. In fact, nobody has, because I just made them this week. I spent a night ripping up a bunch of paper with my artistic 13-year-old daughter, and then we scanned them all in and made some new textures for you guys. So we put that in the chat pod. We also pasted the schedule of, there's more stuff after 5:30, but I pasted the schedule for the next 4 hours into the chat pod so you can see what's happening. So Michelle Grenier is next, then Evgeny Chibrodorov, co-founder of 500px. Then we've got Scott Kelby, Darlene Hinderbrandt, Gary McIntyre, Ilaria Licardi's back. Evgeny Chibrodorov will come back. Catherine Everins talking about macro, and Rick Friedman, who's a photojournalist, sharing minimalistic but powerful editing tips to make images pop for photojournalism. So all that's in the chat pod, but keep paying attention to Angela. Just know it's there. You can scroll up and down in chat. Keep going, Angela. You're doing great.
Awesome. All right. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and choose the overlay texture. And you see that's given this canvas texture to the entire image, but our detail still comes out. Now I feel like the detail of this texture is a little bit strong on my subject. So I'm going to grab my erase tool, make my brush bigger using the bracket key on my keyboard. I'm going to keep that opacity on the lower edge there. That looks pretty good. Maybe make that a little smaller. And then we're just going to start painting this to take some of that texture off of Glenn. There we go. So let's take a look and see what we've got there. I'm going to make that brush a bit smaller, come down here, get his paws, just grab those edges and blend that out a little bit more. Clean this up a bit. All right, getting closer, getting closer. When you get in here and you want to start doing these painterly type images, you are going to spend a little bit of time with the brush. Don't be afraid of it. It does help you refine your image and really takes your image to the next level when you take the time to pay attention to some of those details. So we've still got a little bit of that detail coming in on the edge of his fur. I'm going to lessen that just a little bit. And because we're using a low opacity, it's blending in a little bit more seamlessly. And we're taking away a little bit of it at a time. So your edges don't have to be perfect. So I pretty much want all of it gone on him. And then just a nice and soft blend those edges. All right, so now we've got a really nice texture going on behind our subject. I'm going to add another texture because I want to darken down that background and add a little bit of a mood to this. So we'll go up to add and go back to texture and load texture. And I'm going to scroll down here on this list and see what else catches my fancy. I think I know what I'm going for, but I'll know it for sure when I get there. And this is, how I typically work. I flip through things. I don't necessarily have an end game in mind. I work it as I go. And I really like that sky blue right there. I really like that it has a little bit more detail around the edges than it does in the middle. And that cool tone is really nice. So we'll go ahead and click open on that. Let that place for a second there. Give it a moment to load up. All right. And now let's click on place texture and go to our zoom here, go back to 25%, get this place where we want it. And again, when you're working with a texture like this, your edges don't have to be exact. You just want to make sure your edges are covered, because if you don't, you're going to end up with a gap on the side. So make sure those edges are completely covered. There we go. The only time that those edges being perfectly straight really matters is when you're using a border and you want those borders to line up with the edge as closely as possible. So I'll hit return on my keyboard to commit that, and we'll go back to fit to screen. All right. I'm going to move this opacity again up to 100 and go into my advanced settings, and let's scroll through these blend modes and see what works. Multiply looks good. Let's see. I'm going to go with multiply. And the reason for that is I like that it's kind of darkening down some of what's going on back here. I'm also going to take that brightness and bring this down a bit more. And I think that's looking pretty good. And then I'm going to grab the opacity and pull that back a bit. Now you'll notice that our subject is a bit obscured here, and that's not really what we want. But we made a mask with the last texture that we can use again. So I'm going to go back to my first texture, go to the ellipses tool or ellipses menu, and I'm going to copy my mask, then go back to texture here, click on the ellipses again, and hit paste. And that's going to copy that mask from the first texture to the second texture. Now I can go and I can modify this a little bit more to make it really work the way I want it to. I might pull that brightness back up a little bit, adjust this a little bit more. Let's see here. Just kind of playing the sliders as I go. And you can see that this is, since we have that blue texture that we're working with, as we're going through, we're actually changing the hue of that. So if I want to make it a little warmer or a little cooler, I can do that as I go along the spectrum of the hue here. I think maybe right around, right about there looks pretty good. All right, I'm liking where we've taken this. I think I might want to back off on the opacity, maybe add a little bit more. Again, I'm trying to kind of obscure this darkness back here. What I might do is grab my brush and just ever so slightly get that edge right there a little bit more cleanly. There we go. And now our subject really pops out. We've added some nice texture detail. We've isolated him from the background and given it a really nice painted look. So this is a portrait of your pet or whoever you're wanting to capture. And we've gone from this to this. So that was a lot of fun to do, and I really like how it turned out. Any feedback or questions in the chat, Rich? All right. So let me go to my third example that I have here. I'm not hearing you, Rich. You're muted.
Sorry, let me bring that live. I'm just juggling a million things, trying to make sure that our next guest has it. Can you just reference when you're making these, when you store the template, how does that work? And how do you access it again in the future if you want to pull that in?
Absolutely. Well, let me go back here to this picture of Glenn. And I did this completely from scratch. So let's say I wanted to do this again on another image, and I wanted to have all of those components ready to use for another use. So I can go here into my edit tool. Down here at the bottom, because I didn't use another template, it just says my template and edited. I can click on that ellipses and click save, and that'll automatically get saved into our templates menu. And you can find that by going to templates. And let me back out of this here under my templates, and you'll see that we have here my template edit. I can click on this to rename it and call this Glenn Levitt. That's his name. And then if I ever want to use that exact same process again, I just click on Glenn Levitt, and it'll apply not only the settings I used for mystical and things like that, it's also going to bring in those textures that I used. So you'll still have to do the masking and maybe a little bit of adjustment to the placement depending on the dimensions of the image, but those components are all still there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And Angela, you're going to be back a little later tonight as well. Are you coming back to join us?
Good. I am. Good. Definitely. I'll be joining. Awesome. I think it'll be what? I don't even know. I'd have to look at the schedule again.
So I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping announcements. But before I switch over, Angela, is there anything else you wanted to share before I do a couple of housekeeping announcements before our next guest?
I had one more image, and I can just briefly show
go for it.
And yeah, I mean, it's not a very complicated one. Again, I used a template to just make the bear pop a little bit. And then I added a texture that had snow. And this is a texture pack that I got from Gary McIntyre, who I believe is going to be a guest later on today. So maybe he'll be able to give the link for these as well. I know it was something he gave away a while ago, but I love this snow texture. Here's the before, and then there's the after. And so I went into our templates here, and I used the Bokeh Bright edit. Let's see here. Bokeh Bright is under, I believe it was under Amazing Animals. Nope. I don't remember which collection it was in. And then over here in edit, I added that texture, and then I just painted out a little bit of the detail of the snow so his eye wasn't being obscured. I still wanted to have some of the snow falling in front of him, so I didn't paint all of it out. But it just added a different dimension to the image, and I thought made it a lot more fun.
That's awesome. Oh. Looks absolutely fantastic. Angela, these are great tips. And I encourage folks, twice a day, Angela and Vanelli are doing a live show that you guys can check out. It's called Coffee Break. And one of them is for insider members. So you join Luminar Insiders at insiders.skylum.com. And you get an invite for that as well when you purchase Luminar AI. But you also have one a day that's on YouTube. And those are interactive, right? People can ask questions.
Definitely. So the one on Insiders we do over Zoom, and it's just a regular Zoom meeting. So it's very interactive. We have a lot of fun, great conversations, lots of joking around. It's an absolutely phenomenal group. So if you're in Insiders and you're able to join that one live, I highly recommend it. On the one on YouTube, it's also interactive, but it's just via chat. So we don't get to see your faces and interact face-to-face quite the same, but it's still a great thing to do. And we do the topics week by week. So the topic we do on Insiders one week, we'll do it live again on YouTube the following week. So if you can't make one, you can always make the other. And the YouTube ones are always recorded.